Hey everyone, it's JT from Work It Daily. Welcome back to another episode of Recruiter Table Talk. Today I am talking with Jim Durbin, affectionately known as the Indeed Whisperer. And I cannot tell you how excited I am about this session. So I want to bring him right up here because I want to tell you the story about how this came to be. Hello, Indeed Whisperer.
Howdy.
I love it. I made him wear the hat, by the way, folks. I think that's a requirement if you've got that.
I wear it even when I'm not on stage.
It's even better. It's even better. So first of all, I have to give a proper shout out to the Chad and Cheese podcast. Chad and Joel interviewed you. I mean, I love everything they do. I listen religiously, but I was telling them that this one to me was probably by far one of my favorite because of the depth of what you got into around this idea of recruiting smarter and spending smarter. Especially when it comes to Indeed. So I hope you're going to talk a lot about that today, but I just want to make sure if they're listening, shout out to them because this wouldn't have happened. I literally tracked you down on LinkedIn and we spent, 30, 40 minutes gabbing away. And then I begged you to do this. So,
which is so funny because we did the same thing 5 years ago.
Right? I know.
Let's get it faster than 5 years moving forward.
Let's hope so. Let's hope we do a better job in this. So, but talking to you just as someone who gets it, right? And I know there's a lot of people in our industry that get it.
Right.
But I think the way you're constantly looking at it as it's never good enough. Oh, did we make gains? Great. You don't sit on those gains for a year and you find your next gains in recruiting. And
right.
I just think that's something that you understand better than anybody. So let's get into it for starters, though. We're going to talk about recruiting, but from a candidate standpoint, what do you think is going to be different in 2023 for them? How do you think it'll be different?
I think the most important thing is going to be grit. I look around, everybody's trying to fix the apply process. The problem is it really broken? Mm-hmm. Truth is people get hired. And the question really is, what is it we're intending with these systems?
Right.
If the systems, a lot of them were built when we had lots of candidates that came in from electronic resumes. I mean, God, calling an electronic resume dates me by 25 years. But right. Companies had to figure out what to do with that flux. And so many people coming in, that came up with assessments and filters and all these things that were designed to focus things into a funnel. Well, that's not the case anymore. We're facing labor shortages going into pretty much the rest of our working lives.
Right.
Not to mention that software is starting to struggle. There's lots of software out there, but most of the stuff off the shelf can do 65% if you want. The second you customize it, now you have to train your people, which means software isn't working the way it's supposed to. Integrations are breaking. So you've got this thing where we're getting better, but candidates are getting frustrated. This always happens. It happened in 2008 as well. They're getting frustrated because they don't have instant access with the perfect company. And I was writing about this morning because I think it's a huge mistake to go, well, it takes too long to do this. I would never work for this company. And that's a lot of bravado. What you really have to say is, instead of applying to 500 companies, where are the 5 that I want to work at? And what is it that they're pitching? And how specific can I get? Like everyone hates that you have to upload your resume and then also enter the information for a lot of companies. What they don't know is they've never seen what your resume looks like on the other side. Mm-hmm. Your LinkedIn apply is all chomped up like Frankenstein. Your quick applies don't show it. Your skills don't show. So even though it's a pain, if you're only at 5 companies and you fill out everything they ask you, you're filling out the forms that allow us to search you in the ATS. Mm-hmm. If not, you're hoping that some developer parsed your resume correctly and everybody knows how to search it and uses the right keywords. So the biggest thing I think for candidates is, I know it's frustrating, but focus on the companies you really want to work for. Do what they're asking. Hold them accountable. There's no reason to have bad processes, but telling yourself that this company isn't perfect right now in the application process is going to cost you when we're not hiring like we were even 2 years ago.
Totally.
So have a little grit and pick the company that you want, as opposed to applying 10 times and then whining because, oh my God, no one called me back from a quick apply that I don't even remember if I applied to.
Well, and we tell them all the time, stop spraying and praying, right? So, JT, I applied to 100 companies. I didn't even like most of them and none of them respond to me. Well, and now I'm insulted and now I'm also depressed because what does it say about me? So you're right, that's broken. And I want to pick out something because you talked about there's when we talk about a labor shortage, we're really talking about the right match for the right talent, right? Because there's a ton of people out there looking for jobs, but they don't have the exact skill sets that those employers are looking for. So that whole thing in itself, right? We have to address within our industry. We've got to start to figure out the tools and techniques that are going to let us find that candidate that, on paper doesn't look like they're a fit, but they actually are. If
It's
we
skills
even
versus traits, and it's an
right,
old fight that we lose because a skill I can put on paper. A
right,
trait, I always finish what I do, or I get curious and wake up at 2 in the morning and start reading on things I don't know. There's no way for someone to do anything other than claim that they do that.
right.
So that's definitely a challenge there. The other thing, though, is for recruiters, maybe, because you were pointing that out, that whole 100 times. Um, the last thing I was doing 5 years ago was the sourcing work lab, where we train recruiters on how to find people live.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I would do is I'd go to all the boards and I would apply for jobs just randomly. I had all these fake email addresses over the years, so I'd apply for them. And what was weird is it's really important for us to, not just for yourself, but to other people's applies. Because I remember getting an email. I don't even remember it's from, I've been Gartner or something. I applied for jobs I'm not qualified for, or that I'm tangentially qualified, because I want to see what happens
What happens?
when they snap it out. And I got this rejection about 3 or 4 months. I don't even know, because I couldn't remember. I couldn't remember applying. I didn't know anything about the job. And I was surprised. I didn't want the job. I was surprised at how much the rejection hurt 4 months later from a random email. And you have to do this because you have to empathize with what candidates are going through,
Right,
break through their concerns. But why am I disappointed about a job I didn't want?
right, right.
Well, because no one likes to be rejected. So it's very important for recruiters to understand that, and quit trying to be helpful in the wrong ways.
And that gets me worried, because I do remember 2008. We're going to see a lot of people applying for jobs in this technique of spray and pray,
Right.
and they're going to get a lot angrier than that because of what's going to happen. We're going to see a correction here in terms of what's available. So let me ask
Oh,
you
it
this.
gets worse too. We're now
Right.
focusing on the application process to go faster. Basically, we're putting a supercharger into our Toyota and forgetting the wheels, because you can move your application faster, but your process has to match that. It doesn't do you any good to get them in quickly and ignore them. The average is 3 to 14 days. My company's PSG Global, I'll throw in a quick one for it.
Good.
We call everybody. We have 4,000 recruiters in the Philippines. We call them within minutes.
Wow.
And the impact is enormous, because they feel like it's progress. They don't even remember something they did 7 to 10 days ago.
You just
So
said it.
we
Feels
have
like
to fix our processes, not just apply speed. Because, oh, you have to go faster. I'm like, you have to be consistent, not just fast. Like, no one minds waiting if they know exactly what's going to happen and they know the payoff. What they hate is feeling like they wasted time, feeling like a sucker, getting rejected, especially when it seems so good in the beginning. Oh, hey, I applied. Everything went well. Haven't heard back. That's worse. It's that old peek in theory problem that recruiters always face, where the best thing we can do is say, you're awesome. Would you like a job? Because then after that, it's like, well, you were awesome, but someone else was more awesome. So go away.
Right.
That's what recruiters do. It's no wonder that people have an issue with this.
A big issue. So let's talk about, okay, companies some of them are pulling back on their hiring. We're seeing a lot of layoffs, a lot of restructuring, but
Right.
we know
Some
that,
industries. Yeah.
yeah, but we also know that they're just setting themselves up to hire, right? To now
Right.
hire the right individual. So we know hiring is going to continue. Where do you spend the money in 2023, and where do you not spend the money? I'm putting you on the spot for that. What do you think?
So one is, you have to fix your tech stack. You're too dependent on either LinkedIn or Indeed, or sometimes just your brand.
Yep.
So you got to figure out if one of these sites went down, or if I can look at the source quality, like we do it in terms of, do the people stick 90 days after we place them? And is that dependent on the source? Is it ZipRecruiter? Is it Indeed? Is it personal sourcing? Like, we track everything down to the cost per start, cost per hour. And a lot of companies struggle with this because, honestly, to get any data right, you need a data champion. And we're not there yet.
Mm-hmm.
Data companies aren't there yet, which is its own set of problems. But where you're spending your money, you need to spend more time on your job postings and get those right, because those are your low-hanging fruit. And that was the pitch kind of at Chat and Cheese. Indeed's made a lot of changes, and some people don't like them, and the CPA's coming. But the truth is that most people didn't even notice them because they're not paying attention to what's going on. They're writing a check, they're sitting back, and they just go, oh, more and more.
Right.
They're like locusts that just chase everything down and then are surprised. Like Amazon absolutely ran out of people.
Mm-hmm.
They had to shut centers because they couldn't hire anymore.
Right.
Well, they couldn't hire them at the rate that they were talking about after all the rules. So you're in a position where your tech stack has to bring different kinds of candidates. And then you have to figure out your conversion for them. So everybody loves Indeed for the fact that they do cheap traffic, but that same person's also getting all those emails and they have more opportunities. So you have to decide, am I okay with a top line that says, oh, I got 1,000 candidates. I only hired 1% of 1%, which is a dumb thing to say because every company does that in an age of electronic mail. It's just how that works. So instead, how do we convert it? Where are we converting it? How quick? And what is the difference? Like, what is the actual cost? I figured RPOs have advantage on this, but once you figure that out, then you can figure out your integrations. And right now, there's a bunch of really good companies out there that are working on this. The big ATSs struggle because they're so customized. There's just a lot of wasted time for what you need from that. So these smaller ones are there. The fears they get bought up. And there's Job Sync, which is great at integrations. There's Job Splice, which is Kelly Robinson's, which is like Broadbean 2.0. That's like a manual programmatic where you can pick and choose all of your job boards and run it directly through them instead of working with each vendor. You have Dahlia, which is if you have that issue of so many people are coming to your website and bouncing or not completing your applications, Dahlia does a fantastic job. Then you have JobYak, what's coming up, which is doing Google for Jobs. So you can diversify that's what I've done the last year and a half. And the reason is I've got my costs down so low that one, people don't believe me, like really low, like 50 times better than everybody else there. It's unreal what we can achieve with it. But then I still have to go chase the hard stuff, right? So even though you can get a lot of the easy candidates, what do you do when you're looking for doormen in Nashville? What do you do when you're looking for software developers in Wisconsin? It's a little harder than just posting. So if you can solve the easy stuff, then you spend your recruiter's time and attention focusing on the harder to source stuff, the higher touch stuff, the recruitment marketing. And I worry that we spend most of our time worrying about the easy stuff. And I mean, it's ridiculous what we're spending right now. I've seen budgets that are $1,000 CPHs for no reason. In high volume, there's no excuse for that.
I agree. And that's what I want to make sure everybody's really listening to talk about, which is, you have to look at your budget and say, is this right? And you comment on the tech stack. I think there's a lot of people listening. They don't know how to put a good tech stack together.
Right.
So they default to the most well-known tools. Maybe they're using two things when in reality, if properly built, you might use 5 or 6 pieces of tech. But as you said, bring that cost down so low. That's what we keep meaning about recruiting smarter. How do you find your tech? Because you're always upgrading. I feel like you're always looking for the next thing and how that will, fine tune your tech stack. It's not like you build it and leave it alone for 5 years. So how do you research?
No. Well, I've been very fortunate. The company that I'm with now has an engineering team that's not from HR. They're ThinkBridge out of Austin. And so when they customize something, they fix it. So they got our engineering speeds down so much. When someone applies for one of our jobs, within 30 seconds, it's in our system.
Okay.
Which is not 6 hours, which is what the average. We're not sending us as CSV. So there are a lot of really bright people. All those companies that I mentioned, they sit and they chat. The programmatic companies, I feel like I have good relationships with them and just talking through how this is supposed to work. Because there's plenty of money flying around the industry right now. The real question is, do you understand it? What I'm finding is that directors specifically are struggling. This is all new. TA is relatively new. 2005 or 6 is when it became a thing, when COOs decided they didn't want marketing or sales or CTOs taking their budgets. So TA is less than 20 years old. Advertising for us used to just be posting jobs. The idea that now it's programmatic and integration and everything else is tough because none of us are built like that.
Right.
So part of it is you have to find the trusted partners internally. And you have to know exactly what you're asking for. I don't think the average person is digging in and looking at their domains. They're not thinking about how the SEO on their main website affects their career site.
Correct.
They're not looking at, that's one of the reasons things are so fast for us. They haven't looked at their campaigns and their process. So I've been fortunate enough that I took a job where instead of managing 140 people, I have one, and then my whole job is playing with spreadsheets. So in the last year and a half, I don't have a problem saying, other people freak out, but 500,000 applicants, 22 cents CPA. I'll throw it out there. Why not? Because it's true.
And because I want people to understand, if you listen to that, you've got so much room to improve. Like there can't be one recruiter on here with budget that can't find a way to save some money and improve the ROI.
Medical imaging technologies for $1 when other people are getting them for 80. I mean, it's and what it is that you take care of the little details. You make sure your jobs are posted correctly. You make sure that you understand not just posting a job, but how it actually works. And that's where people struggle. I was lucky enough to be around when we were building all this 20 years ago. We used to have to build our own sites, right? We had to hand code video before you could just push a button. So when I look at something on the screen, the user interface, the UI, and I also worked with a bunch of UX people, so I know what they're trying to do. I don't believe what I read on the screen because I'm thinking, okay, how is this going to impact the algorithm or the data behind it? There are lots of people who do that. The problem is they tend to be in marketing technology and they don't talk to us. And when they do, they're dismissive because their budgets are so big, they don't have to think about it. So we've been pushing this for a long time. What you really need to do is get someone from marketing, specifically MarTech, into your TA. They need to report to you.
Agreed.
And begin to work with your IS system and others. And the results will be what would be 50% savings on your budget to put it towards something else?
Right.
Especially when they're going to cut. You're going to see budgets cut now. How are you going to respond to that when all you're thinking about is that top line number? And then conversion is the other aspect, the shopping cart. You can't be losing 92% of the people that come to your website. That's just a crazy number.
So that unpacks so much for me because you've already talked about it. You don't need 100,000 candidates, especially if the 999,000 of them aren't even a match, right?
Right.
So that whole thing now gunks up your entire system and what you need to do and the resource you're spending dealing with those candidates when you're not ever going to hire them.
Right.
So this idea of getting smarter, bringing fewer people to your page, but a higher percentage of them being a match and completing your application process is really sort of the gold standard at this point, what we're trying to make happen.
And yet we don't do it. It doesn't make sense to me. What's the point of a chatbot but to make your life easier? When you look at sales chatbots, you love them. When you go and you pull up your app and look at your credit card or look at your bank statement, or if you go and you can buy a car with your phone in 15 minutes. But trying to get anything done in employment it's miserable and difficult, and it shouldn't be. I hate that word should, but it is a bizarre thing. I think we have to get better at it.
We have to.
I think the hardest part is that we tend to adopt what other people do. Like the whole idea of a funnel. You should never have a recruiting funnel. It's more like a cylinder because the funnel suggests that when you get to the bottom, it goes faster and visually you're creating more tension for yourself. And we just borrow stuff. And I think one of the problems that we run into that is this idea. We don't know what conversion is. But we did personas. I saw personas recently, and it just cracked me up because 10 years, I used to be in marketing. So 10 years ago, we were doing personas and recruiting on stage. And they'd go, look, we have a persona. And I'm like, and what did you do with it? What? That's nothing. What's the point of having it if you're not going to use it? So there's a lot of that. And the good news is we know exactly what to do, JT.
Yeah.
We saw it happen in B2B. We have 10 years of open field in front of us if we just pay attention to the details. And unfortunately, in times like this, we like to hire recruiters and say, get it done, and not give people the time to fix it. So I think there'll be huge winners and losers from that.
So let's get into Indeed a little bit, because really, you are affectionately the Indeed whisperer. We're going to keep using that term. When you look at where you got this down to such a low number,
right?
Without giving all the secret sauce away, can you give somebody just an idea of one thing they should maybe go look under the hood with respect to their Indeed?
When are your jobs posted and indexed? Okay. That's probably the easiest one.
Okay.
Because it's not what you think it is. So I'm not talking about if you go look at your job and you can see the date that it says posted. I'm saying, when does the internet think that job was posted? That's a lot harder, which means that your director can't do it. Your HRIS guy can't do it. They're wrong because they haven't. Who is individually posting that job? And what you find is almost all of the ATSs that are out there are converting templates, and those templates have JSON metadata sitting in the background that tells them the job's much older. So we've sat down and seen jobs that are 5 or 6 years old that look like they got some plastic surgery, and like they look like they're 3 days old, but the algorithms are teaching it badly. So that's a big one, because you have to know how your jobs are posted. And when you make a mistake, if you double post a job, for example, when we're running campaigns and we post the same job because somebody forgot to change the title, that impacts my campaigns as much as 100%. I can pay twice as much. And until those jobs are cleaned and started over, that impacts my campaign for the full 2 weeks. And I don't think people grasp most of that. The other thing is I'd go stutter DCA, dollar cost averaging. It's one of the reasons I did this. I was doing it with Bitcoin. I was trying to understand more of the crypto world. I got a lot of friends that play in that space. And the more I looked at it, I was like, I bet you I can do this with algorithms.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started applying it. I actually learned there's a guy in Oklahoma who figured out how they use bingo. They use bingo cards for their slots. So he explained how that worked. And so I started going up on Saturdays at 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. on Sundays. And I would just win boatloads because that was the time. Your trick is you have to do exactly what they don't expect you to do. So every poll is different. There is no lucky machine. If you go up on Saturdays when the tables are full, they want to win that money back to you because they did it on a weekly instead of a yearly strategy.
Okay.
So I would go up and you win 75-cent jackpots. So you make $600 or $700 every time, as long as you're willing to go from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. because
on
it
Saturday
wasn't
to Sunday.
And bounce from machine to machine, right? You put your money in, you move from machine to machine. As you move it, you never think you're going to win. And I looked at that. It doesn't work anymore, sadly. But that's the same way that I look at the LinkedIn algorithms. Pretty much anytime somebody wants you to do something, when Google says, we know how you react, you're like, no, you have a UI that tells me what to do. So if you can really understand what it is they want you to do, and you can act in an opposite manner, you uncover these massive gains where it's not like we don't have CPC bidding. Why we have sometimes we've seen 2 and 3 cent CPCs when the average is somewhere around $1.
Right.
Because we're not doing what they told us to do. We got everything clean. So think of calling myself the Indeed Whisperer, how dumb that is. If I ever did anything wrong, I mean, I love it because it makes me laugh and I love branding. But if I ever did anything wrong, Indeed would easily cut me off. And they should. Like if I were doing something, if I were hacking it or if
Sure.
whatever it is, the second I do the slightest thing wrong, they have all the power in the world to shut me off, as they should. But we're as clean as can be because our whole thing is focusing on speed. We want to get people to work and we call them. So we don't get complaints. We're talking to people immediately. And I think that's a big aspect of it is if you're going to go through Indeed, pay attention to the details, keep things clean. Look at your titles. Stop putting PT and FT. Nobody knows what those are.
Right.
Just call it part-time or full-time if you have to. Figure out, we haven't really figured out titles, but my favorite was because the first thing I did for Indeed was sourcing. And I trained our people how to find twice as many people as existed with housekeepers. So they'd search housekeeper, but is housekeeper one word or two? It's user-generated content. So it's whatever they decide it is.
Right.
So I would search housekeeper, house space keeper, and even housekeeper. And I would find twice as many people. And then I'd look for housekeeping and then clean and made. And so you could build Boolean inside of Indeed, and then you write a decent template. And we were getting a perpetual motion machine. Our reward system they used to have, we'd have thousands of emails sent out because so many people responding. We had over 100 score. And they loved it. It was amazing too. And we were finding people who hadn't been found before. Because what is the difference between a housekeeper, a housekeeper, and a maid? Nothing. Just their title.
The title. I mean, we've always had that challenge, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, trying to find the right skills. People call it different things. I was showing people one time, let's pull up job descriptions of account managers. There are 100 different job descriptions. Some are support positions, some are pure sales positions, right? Like just the terminology alone, like you said, you have to get a lot more intentional about that for sure.
And Indeed tries to norm title that. That's what they call it, is a norm underscore title in their code. And the problem is that you can't really. One of those, I was a durable medical equipment associate provider. And I'm like, I don't have any data on that. What the heck is that? Or
might as well be Greek. Yeah.
I mean, but there is a difference, and we don't tend to differentiate. We differentiate them by salaries, which is problematic on its own.
Right.
But I mean, honestly, the key is for Indeed is, do you know what's happening? Do you know what your costs are? Do you know where your stuff's coming from? Have you done your source codes?
Right.
Have you just spent time digging through and actually checking your data? And what you'll find is those few, it's like that 1% rule. You improve that. I didn't get that overnight. I made some big changes in the first month, which dropped stuff, but watching them drop again, another 60, 70% after I fixed it was a lot of that's just engineering. It's just details. You have to have the time. And we're spending enough money that companies are looking at it now. Instead of your $40,000 person who's just pushing jobs up, some of the folks who are doing what we're talking about, they're getting salaries well over 6 figures. There's a demand for them. Because if you're spending $5 million in budget a year
That's my
or
point.
more, now there's a reason to dig in and get that right. Yeah, it's pretty exciting to watch, actually.
It is, and it brings out a whole new group of people that will be employed in our space, right? You know what you're
But
talking
all have to
about.
be trained, and
But it will matter. It will really matter. Do you think the change in and how Indeed's going to charge, how's that going to impact people? Do you think?
I have two thoughts on it. One is it doesn't really impact enterprise right now because we're already on CPA and I've been using program. We haven't been on CPC since January. So on the one hand, it doesn't. There is that concern. So if you go for a small business right now and I go open Indeed account, they'll charge me $10 an applicant. And if I don't know what I'm doing, I had a buddy, paying $700 accidentally,
Yeah.
which is not good. They need to fix that because it's not what he wanted, right? And the big issue is that you can determine what an applicant is, and that's what so Indeed wants you on their platform. My only concern about that is if they start arbitrarily setting those and saying like $5, it ruins the whole point of everything that I'm doing. And I'll have to switch over to another platform because there's no way I can switch from paying even $1 to 5 or 10. That's 5 or 10 or 100 times the cost. Even if other people were doing it,
right.
we're not built on that. So there's a lot of integration that'll go from that. It'll be interesting to see what Indeed does. I think it'll be rolled out slower than people think. And I mean, a lot of people are already doing that. A lot of the smaller niche job boards. I'm actually going to be on with Stephen Rothberg next week talking about what CPA means.
Right.
Because it means that you have to learn to understand what quality is. But do job boards? Does Indeed know what quality is? Does anyone in the industry know what quality is?
Correct.
Its chemistry is not easy to figure out. Why is it rainmakers fail at their next company? There's a lot that goes into it that we don't know, that we can't fix. But the expectation is we can provide quality candidates. And
I worry about people burning budget trying to figure it out too, right?
Oh, yeah.
You had budget to figure out and save, but if people aren't trained and don't know any better, like your friend, people can
Very
burn
important.
through really quickly.
And you should just know if you're in this, you're going to mess up and you're going to spend $20,000 accidentally. What I tell people I train and I hire for this is if you're not waking up at 2 a.m. in a cold sweat, you're probably not doing it right. Because you've got to dig in and fix these. The good news is once it's there, you can do other stuff, right? So you're in a different place. So it's not as much of an issue.
So what do you think about, so Indeed will still be a big player in 2023. Do you think there's any up and coming players, any places that people are going to be able to, get in early, or the price is still reasonable? What do you think?
There are a lot of European companies that are trying to come in. A place like talent.com and Adzuna and Talru, and they're all trying. They're trying to get to that point. So we'll see. But they just don't have enough organic traffic yet. And Europe is different than the United States in that. Right. So that's the challenge we have there. I think the bigger thing is going to be our databases. I don't think anyone's going to dethrone Indeed anytime soon. They have a lot of traffic coming their way, and a lot of people buy it from them. The question is, the big question's always been if Google or Facebook or somebody else steps in, there's a lot of data sitting out there. So that's the question, is what to do from there.
Interesting. So if there was one piece of technology that you think everybody should be investing in that they maybe haven't yet, what do you think it is in the tech stack?
Honestly, probably it's not a popular one, but data analysis. HR has to speak data, and we don't. I get in trouble when I say that. They're like, I look at spreadsheets all day. I'm like, that's not what I'm talking about.
Right.
Do you understand data? And the answer is we don't. So there's all these data literacy programs. That's probably the first step. Then the next step becomes, okay, do you understand integrations? Do you understand webhooks and APIs and XMLs? Because how you do that will impact things. Even if you're terrible at campaigns, they'll make a big difference. So the question is, how do you fix it from there? I would say integrations and data literacy are the two glaring holes for everybody. Don't feel bad if you don't have it, but those are the two big ones.
So the people that are taking the entire bottle of aspirin and downing it right now and saying, this isn't what I want my job to be, right? That's a fair point, right? But this is where a lot of it's going. Where do you think they'll outsource it to? Or
Um,
can you outsource it? At some point in time, you probably can't. At some
the
point in time, it has to
Philippines is
come
doing a lot. They speak English. They work hard. There's like 70 million of them in the workforce. If you don't pay attention to it, they'll be there. I think the challenge is recruiters are so busy. I used to joke around that recruiters are lazy because they're busy. They're given too much to do,
out.
and
Agreed.
we have not trained recruiters under 40. We've eaten our seed corn with that. It's terrifying because we split up what recruiting and sourcing were. And instead of teaching full life cycle or giving people time to absorb it, we're saying just do this one thing. They get
Right.
really good at it. They go to another company and they have no clue. I mean, good Lord, this salary transparency stuff is there because we don't know how to do salary negotiation.
Correct.
There's no reason to post it on a job.
Mm-hmm.
There's no reason to post it on a job because you're supposed to be able to talk on the first time. But if you're not talking to candidates, good Lord, if you're not talking to candidates and telling them that, you really are wasting their time and yours. But we forgot to do it. So now we have to post it all and we have to deal with those kind of things. So
I agree with you. I just really want to see people have these conversations sooner. And I think that goes back to, too, a better job of telling the talent what we need. So you talked about perfecting the job description, making sure they understand more about the company.
right.
But at the same time, where can they go find that? So for me, for example, job seekers are now, they're job shoppers, right? We've got the tipping point happened in COVID. Everybody's a purpose-driven professional. I don't want to work for a company that I don't identify with. Right? I'm going to go shop for a job and I want to find an employer based on these things. Well, tell me where they can go search on that. Where do I go search and find the companies that, believe in these causes and they can't. There's no way yet for job seekers to be job shoppers. So I think you're going to see that we talk about going where they are. You look at platforms like TikTok, you look at LinkedIn, who's now becoming a creator platform, right? They're heavily pivoting in that direction. I think there's going to be a real upside for companies to be figuring out that part of their business and then connect to their systems, the systems upgrades that you're talking about.
So much traffic. How do we? It's the same issue we had with social. When you first go into social,
exactly,
you've now set people up to assume that they can come to you on social with their problems.
Yep.
So you go to TikTok, guess what? They want to talk about you. You get to control that. Addictive. How do you not do it? And how do you convert that? How do you explain that's great? We had fun gathering you, but here's the process. And here's why it matters to you. We forgot to do that. We used to do that with college kids back in the 90s, telling them what's in it for you. I come work for Frito-Lay, drive on a truck, you'll get into the executive program. Now we just say, put your dues in. Right. And that's not good enough. Why are we asking you to do those things? So
yeah,
it'll be interesting to see. That's a big part. There's a lot of traffic to come from TikTok.
Huge. Yeah. And figuring how to do that. A lot of companies don't want to specifically be on it, but they need a presence on it. So, that'll be fascinating to see how that, but then getting them over there, that's the thing I worry about, because we're talking to companies all the time and saying, you need to be on TikTok, but what's the point if I can get the TikTok traffic over there and then it's going to bomb on your careers page or your ATS is going to stink and they're not.
And then they're going to make fun of you and you're going to have 30 TikToks. Yeah. Because you asked them to register and go do your WotC before you.
Completely. No, I totally, that's the big concern is don't go do that front end stuff. And you were talking about a funnel. Again, I get worried. People are still trying to fill the funnel. Like, just let me get as many people in there as possible. Why?
Because that's how they speak data to their bosses.
Right.
They say, oh, we saw 20% more applicants. And what they don't get is the next question is, great, how many people did we hire?
Exactly.
Oh, you wanted to count. Oh, well, I don't have that kind of accent. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know that data. And I told you that story last time we chatted. I was, I had a company come to me and the person that ran all the contracts said, could you just look at our spend and do you see anything odd? And so I came back and said, you spent hundreds of thousands on Monster, 100,000 on Career Builder. It was $500,000 total between the two platforms. They said, can you just go into your system and tell me how many hires you got from that? And he came back and he was like 0. I said, so you're going to spend $500,000 again next year? That
we usually get 3.5% out of that. It's not 0, but
zero. That was crazy. So that's the kind of thing that people just aren't asking. The money's going up, but what's the ROI?
Right. Exactly.
So if you, who do you think, I'm going to put you on the spot besides yourself, because your company is doing an amazing job. Are there any companies you can point to that you think are doing noticeably better than others when it comes to all the way from the recruitment, marketing, strategy, the candidate experience? Anybody stand out to you?
I mean, I was just at the Candies, so there's probably about 70 companies that are sitting there that are get it, that are putting time into candidate experience, that are working to fix it, because it's different for each one. Hospitals are so much different than the security firms, which are different than soft SaaS companies. So, I mean, there's a lot individually. The problem is most ones I like it's because I like the people involved.
Right.
So I'm not really objective about that. And even the stuff that I do is I point out it doesn't do you any good to have cheap candidates if you're not converting them over. So I actually live in fear that my company's going to think that this is normal. But the reality is it's not really a parlor trick, but it's not guaranteed for forever. Costs are going up, candidates are going down, focus is important. And we've seen this at every company. It's the illusion of choice. If I give you 50 candidates, you're not hiring anybody. If I give you 3, you're going to hire somebody. So we've got this issue of how do we retrain the industry to look at the right number of choices and make it, and not think that there's always an unending supply of people ready to take your job. It's a tough one. It's a re-educate, because it's not in their best. They don't want to know that, but we have to teach them that.
Great point. And I think there's a lot of recruiters out there that don't feel like they have a voice. And so they just feel like I have to get them the exact match they were looking for. And so I'm going to go out and do that as well. Again, it goes back to that earlier discussion around we've got to look at candidates that are non-traditional or, that don't fit this, specific checklist. And I can't.
We got to get better at sales.
Exactly.
You got to quit taking. It's like joke around. If somebody came to me and said, I want software developers in Silicon Valley, I'm like, I'm sure you do. That sounds great. Tell me how you get that, right? Or I want this and that. I'm like, that sounds great. How do you do that? The problem is you can say that as a consultant because you don't really care if 99 people hate you as long as one keeps writing you the checks.
Right.
So you're just being as bluntly honest as possible so that they get it. It's like, I remember one person telling me, we've never had anyone negotiate, come back and offer, they've never not taken an offer we've given. And I'm like, so do you only hire people that don't have any other opportunities? Or you just pay so outrageously high, only fools turn you down? They're like, what? I'm like, because that's what you just told me. It sounded good. What you really said is that you don't have competition and you pay too much. And it just never occurred to them because no one had ever said, hey, quality matters. You want people to turn down your jobs. Not a lot, but every once in a while. And it's just little stuff like that. I guess comes with being a Gen Xer.
Yep.
We've been around,
I agree.
Hey, when you're in trouble, look for the man in the hat. That's pretty much, that's what the Gen Xers do. What
happens when they left us home alone, latchkey kids, right?
Exactly. My mother swears that didn't happen. I'm like, I literally had a latchkey. And I was raised by television. How do you not admit? Oh, I don't remember that. Like she's remembering when I was 3. No, you didn't leave me home at 3, but that's not boomers.
I know, right? You gotta love it. So how do you think recruiting is going to be different, recruiting millennials versus Gen Z?
Well, my concern with millennials is that we cut all of I actually have a soft spot for them because all that stuff that was coming in the early 2000s, everybody's like, oh, it's going to change. And really, it was a couple of people with good degrees in New York, Chicago, and LA that's what they wrote about. No one talks about the fact that the millennials were in Afghanistan, that the millennials went to community college or didn't go to a perfect school or a doctor's. Those people weren't slacking and showing up late. It's a totally different world. So a lot of it was created. What really happened, though, is that they cut managers, and so managers weren't around. And because of that, they didn't get the chance to learn a lot of basic things that are out there. And that's a real challenge. So when I work millennials, I always ask them a different question. With the Gen Z, I'm straightforward, and I just tell them, hey, this is what it is. Here's what you're going to learn. Here's how long you need to stay. Here's your next thing. Let's talk about your career. You need to set expectations. And I found that they're hardworking and amazing as long as you're clear with them.
Yep.
Millennials, you have to play some word games. My favorite was the one when I mapped out Austin for social media. I asked a bunch of people, what do you want to do in your next job? And these bright, fun kids just lost their minds. Like they clam up and never call back. And I was like, well, that's weird. So I tried a different angle. I said, what do you want your next job to do for you? Floodgates open.
Of course.
They had no question because they were taught that you didn't work. A lot of them didn't have jobs till 22 or 25. They were taught you go in, you get your good transcript, you do all your volunteer work, you belong to the right things. And once a company realizes how awesome you were, they'll teach you what to do. Well, that's much different than planning your career out. And in some ways, it's smarter than what we did because companies don't have any loyalty to us. We saw that happen. So they keep seeing divisions laid off. All the device people for Amazon that just got laid off, they didn't have anything to do with it. They could have done great work, but that's the position that they're in. So for them, I usually try to figure out what it is they actually want to do next and focus them in. And then you just got to watch out for the ones. I think there's a lot of people out there that they're so terrified of rejection. Like this was the old days when people will text. And so you've got to figure out how to show them what professionalism is, and that it's okay to be that, and it won't leave them behind. That is a challenge though, because what do you do when someone's been working 15 years? I've struggled with it inside the corporations.
Yeah.
They get mad at me when I tell them, I laugh about salary negotiation. They're like, oh, that's terrible. I'm like, I'm only laughing because we've all been through it. You just haven't felt enough pain to fix it. But then they're like, well, that's not nice. I'm like, yeah, but you shouldn't have your job if you can't do that.
Right.
So it's very difficult to do those. A lot of it is just having the right kind of empathy. And I don't know. I'm not great at managing people. But people like me, but I don't understand it because I'm a Burger King manager from 1984. I'm like, show up, do your work, go home, we're good.
And I have to say too, when you think about it from a recruiting standpoint, each generation wants even more tech-enabled recruitment process, right? So
right. Supposedly,
right,
we claim that, but do they really?
Well, the one thing I'll say is this: I've heard from a lot of Gen Z that they cannot understand why there hasn't been TikTokification of recruitment. Like they talk about that constantly. Like, why isn't there a site I can go to?
Because they're not that important.
There you go.
That's it. It's like people saying, I've never talked to a recruiter. You haven't had a job that mattered yet.
Enough.
When you bounce around and someone just gives you a job because you know somebody else or it's entry level, recruiters, of course, aren't calling you. There's a reason why nobody talks to you until you're 30. The idea that we're just supposed to make it 15 seconds of video and you can learn from that,
right,
that is nonsense. That's a consumer culture to buy stuff. It's not how you get jobs.
But if you know they're driving that, what are companies going to have to do? They're going to have to do some form of that to pull them through, don't you think?
They're going to have to build wizards. They're going to have to build Clippy.
They're going to have to have that content in some way, shape, or form, and then pull them in, like you said. But they want.
We have to quit assuming everybody knows everything and start explaining why. And what we'll find out is we didn't know that much either.
Right.
For all the jokes about it, there's a lot of things that we're lacking because we just assumed we'd always done that way. Have you ever heard of first is worst?
No.
Yeah. Have you ever seen someone throw away the first resume because there's no way it could be any good?
No.
So you actually have seen that on television. The British Office, he takes a stack of resumes, throws half of them away, and says, "Don't hire people who aren't lucky." But there was a thing for a while there, but never look at the first resume. I saw it back in LA, back when we were still doing paperweight resumes and faxing and stuff like that. And what I think happened is people threw away the fax cover sheet. And then Monster and Career Builder came along where you can print resumes. And so people kept seeing you throw away the first sheet, created a thought behind it. And now there are people who actually believe never look at the first resume. And they come up with all these stories about it.
That's mind-blowing to me.
The vestigial tale. I don't know why we did it. We always have. Sarah always used to take the first one and throw it away. We figured because it was a fax cover sheet. No one knew. No one knows what fax cover sheets are now. Wouldn't that be crazy? You know how much stuff happens like that?
I can't. Like, that blows my mind. So I have another one for you. This conversation came up, and I want your take on it. When Monster came on the scene, Career Builder, job boards came on the scene, they were like, oh, recruiting's going to be wiped out. Right?
Right.
We're not going to be recruiting anymore.
Monster actually had stuff that said staffing firms were the industry, and Reid Hoffman's pitch was, we don't want to pay recruiters. They wanted to come after us.
And that was my point. Then LinkedIn came on the scene, and they said, oh, this is going to fix it this time because people are going to be in there, and they'll be able to connect with one another. That didn't kill our industry.
No, we grew. We got bigger.
I know. So do you see anything down the line? Like, what do you that I just can't imagine there's anything that could make us shake in our boots in terms of a lack of need.
We'll be the very last ones on the lights out because someone has to do the hiring. And What people forget is that these are humans making human decisions. And they're a lot harder than picking a mortgage or other because there's a lot of variables that go into it. So there's no math, there's no calculator that comes up with the right way that tells you about how you feel, if you're like your boss, it's the right work-life balance. It's all dependent on you, where you are in life. The jobs I take now, I couldn't have done 10 years ago. Jobs I might take today, I would have laughed at in the past, or I would have wanted 2 or 3 of them. So because of that, we've got to decipher that. And what we've really got to be good at is learning to communicate what it is the company wants, not the EVP. What is the actual job? It's like the opposite of Office Space. What is it you say that you do here? You really have to dig in for a lot of people and ask, because a lot of people don't do anything. But then the ones who do, you've got to uncover it, because are they an account manager? Are they a housekeeper? Are they housekeeper is my favorite, because no one's ever called that person. And I'm sure when you email them, they're like, oh my God, I've been trying for 2 years to get a job.
Finally. Finally.
And it doesn't occur that's because no one's ever searched for a housekeeper before.
So if I hear you correctly, where there's really a chance for movement is getting the job description right, getting in the head of the hiring manager, right, and making sure they're giving you the right info for starters. Like, do they really know what they need in a candidate? And then translating that and distributing it. If there was one place where we could be fundamentally better, it sounds like that's it.
My guess is they're going to come up with a software. Like, they have the ones now that rewrite the job descriptions, but they're still banal. They're boring.
Right. Boring.
It's like the person on LinkedIn who says, I work with various industries and multidisciplinary fields across an omni-channel approach. You're like, you didn't say anything. You just repeated yourself. We have that with job descriptions. And what is, just tell me what it is I actually do. The problem is, if you actually told people what you do, you probably wouldn't get paid as much, and you wouldn't take the job. And you're like, I have to reconcile reports once a month. I hate that. So it's, how do you get really, really clear about what the job is and what it takes to succeed in it? And then once you've done that, there's a danger in writing really good job descriptions. Most people haven't gone that far. They're like, oh, if we just fix job descriptions, everything would be fine. I worked for a company that spent a lot of time in the process. They had 6 interviews. They were very picky. They were clear about it. The writing was fantastic. And what we found is everybody loved it until they were rejected. And then what they really loved about the messaging and the caring and the feedback and the very clear descriptions, the problem is they described a company that they really wanted to work for. And if you have a perfect company with a perfect job description and you're not selected, guess whose problem it is? Mm-hmm. You're the one who's done. And so, strangely enough, too good of a process will make people angry at you, because they can't complain about the recruiter. They can't complain about the software. So, as I'm saying, there's a lot of psychological stuff in here that we don't always get to.
Well,
but
what can we do to take the sting out of it? So you're getting rejected. Okay. So that candidate's not moving forward. What could you do to make them not feel so bad?
There are a couple of people trying this. I've seen it. The problem, it's very labor intensive, but you should be teaching people how to interview and apply.
Yes.
Very difficult to do from a company standpoint, because it's hard to prove that ROI. But if you have a problem with people who don't like you, and you teach them just basics, give them the answers, tell them what to expect, walk them through it. That's what the whole point of chatbots and wikis are for. If you really do a good job with that, there's a person I think who does it for Amazon interviews. Like, that's all they do is teach you how to get good at Amazon interviews. So we know that this stuff works, but companies will have to have enough pain before they start making that. They'll also have to start training people, have very, very clear training. We have a long way to go with learning and development. It's just boring. I'll say it. I've never had a good one. I've tried sourcing and training. Most of the time, I'm a monkey dancing on stage. If they like you, it's because of the microphone or the hat. They don't remember anything that you said. So it's sustained habit change over time.
Right.
I think we've got this dangerous, we can hack everything. The millennials went through, because they went through a time of 0% interest on 0% money.
Right.
They don't realize that you have to be profitable and work. And a hack sometimes teaches you how to skirt something without knowing how to do it. And then when that situation changes, now you're stuck because you never learned the basics. So it's, I hate to say back to the basics, but why is it we're doing the things we do, and where can we automate it?
Right.
If it's seamless, you don't notice it. You don't notice it when you look up your bank account balance. It doesn't bother you because it's right there. Talking to someone about a charge, that's a different story.
Yeah. I just, on my side of the business right now, this is what we're talking about, partnering with companies and saying, give us all the people you rejected and let's put them in our career coaching program and give them some free coaching, right? Just so that they, feel like they're getting better. Because the thing we hear all the time is, well, I just want the recruiter to tell me why I didn't get the job. And I have to explain to them that, I'm sorry, but imagine there's a bushel of apples and they all look fabulous, but you can only have one apple. What do you tell the other apples, right? I'm sorry, you just weren't exactly what, like, it just, you have to wrap your head around it. They didn't say no, not ever. They didn't say you were horrible. They just didn't choose you. But people struggle with that.
Maybe for good reason, or maybe for bad reasons, or
but companies don't want to be in the business of telling you. They don't want to tell you what you did wrong, and certainly the liability factor now, right? Nobody wants to explain why you didn't get the job. So it's just, I think about what's coming and I think about the rejection. I think anybody listening today, if your strategy in 2023 is to get as many applicants as possible, like you said, the 30 TikToks that are going to come out about your company could do irreparable damage to the brand.
Here's one for you. Is ghosting horrible, or is ghosting a rational response from both the candidate and the employer? Is it a rational response to how people react? That's a tough one. I don't know I know what the correct answer should be,
but it's also the whole employee-employer relationship is disintegrated, right? Like you said, in this process of hacking, to try what this hacking has actually diminished that. So the respect isn't there.
It's
Trust
really
isn't
not
there, right?
It's a real challenge.
And I love
in some companies, it's not. There are companies that do really well. They're just not touted. And again, they have the same problem somebody else does. Once people know they exist, it seems like Shangri-La. And
that's it. Right. That's it. I know.
They didn't match my 401k. I would never work for a company that didn't match my 401k. I have bad news for you. Your 401k ain't going to work. At Gen X, I don't believe anything's going to be there. So
yeah, no, I'm totally there with you. I completely get it. This was amazing. You were amazing. What have I not asked you? What have I not asked you? I need to know. 2023 predictions.
I think that we'll see a continued change in industries. That's a big one. I really feel for the people in hospitality because a lot of them had fantastic brands and a loyalty from their employees. And when they had to furlough and there just wasn't anybody there for a year and a half, it broke the spell. But hospitality people are special. They take a lot of joy in doing their jobs and little things like making sure the chairs are right or that food's down a certain way. And it's just in you or not in you. And a lot of those people have moved out of the industry, which is a shame. But it's dangerous when everything is, who could have guessed that they were going to shut everything down? Right. So because they moved elsewhere, that's going to be hard. A lot of things, restaurants will go. When was the last time you had good food at a restaurant that was on time and the server did well and the kitchen didn't? But we can't complain. If we don't want to pay people enough, we can't complain about it. I think that's the big prediction. A lot of companies are going to disappear who've been buying other companies on debt. And you need to make sure you're not in a company who has a giant debt sheet that can't roll it over this year because of the interest rates, because that's going to be scarier than anything else because those jobs don't come back. So that'll be a tough one, but that's coming.
Did you hear the scary prediction that to get the interest rates back down, we're going to require 7% unemployment for 10 years? That came across my desk.
Yeah. Definitely it's economists who've predicted 11 of the last 3 recessions, but there is something to say about that. They're just now trying to the problem is all the MBAs after 1980 never realized there was an economy before Bretton Woods. They didn't understand the gold standard. They can't imagine the world that's different. And until they make those, you still hear people talking about stuff like wage inflation. We've got to quit raising wages or else inflation continues. I'm like, it wasn't the 40% of money we all printed in a quarter 2 years ago. It might be something more complicated than that. So just stay away from the news. That's really the key.
Agreed.
At all times, there's something better you can be doing. So.
Which just makes you feel worse. You're right. So turn it off. So the lesson today is turn it off.
Turn off the news and listen to JT. That's
and so where do you want everybody to find you? Where do you want people to connect with you?
The only place I really am is LinkedIn. I got rid of almost all my social media years ago because it was just not. It was great for a while, and it just felt like poison.
Am I going to get you on a guest TikTok then?
I mean, I'll do stuff, yeah, but I just don't. I don't have a distribution network anymore. So it's pretty much LinkedIn's the only thing I have left.
And
So
when are you gonna teach a class on what you've learned and built, like you said, between applying dollar
it's
cost
probably
averaging?
a little while. It's a little while away. Like we talked about, training people or trying to do that, but it's a lot of work to do those, as you well know.
Yeah.
And you just got to figure out where time best. One of the things I like about high volume is I can't individually impact someone's life the way I used to, where you help someone with the job and you can see the impact. But I've put hundreds of thousands of people to work every year for the last 4 or 5 years, and I get a tiny bit of credit for that. So every time I make things a little easier for them, I get that tiny credit, and that's kind of what fuels me, because I don't have the individual lives anymore that I can impact.
Right.
So if I'm getting people jobs, I feel like I'm doing my part.
Well, I think you need to do some kind of boot camp, some sort of case study, lock everybody in a room and take them through it
Right.
beginning to end, because it would
An
really.
escape room.
I just
They
think
have
about
to get
that.
the
Yeah, they gotta get the next
right.
move right to get out. Like, I really like that. No, you cannot leave this room until you get the answer correct, and then you move to the next room.
Well, we're about
That would be-
$150 million into funding for the Netflix documentary. That's exactly what that is, coming in summer 2026.
That would be perfect. But think about how many
Funny.
people could change up their budgets and spend money on other stuff, if they just had this training. So I think you need to do it. And everybody should now message Jim on LinkedIn and tell him that they need the class.
Ask me just for coffee or to tickle my ear. That's the great way to do it.
I love it. This was awesome. An hour always goes really, really fast with you. So we need to do this again.
I like
in
talking to you so
2023.
much, JT.
I love talking to
You're
you.
so fun.
I just hope everyone follows you, because this is such smart stuff. I mean, I just like hearing people who are doing smart stuff in the industry, not just, like you said, getting busy instead of being productive. I don't like that. And I just think there's a lot of busy people out there who are watching their budgets climb. If they just stepped back for a minute, and looked at it
before someone shuts it off for them.
Exactly. Right. Before somebody says, why are we spending all this money? And that's that's the final word for this. You can sit here and say, it's a headache and I don't want to do it. But someday someone's going to walk down the hallway and say, what have you been doing? And why are we spending this kind of money? You're out. I think that's it. You've got to pay attention.
Yeah. That's true.
All right. Well, this is great. Until next time, everyone, for those of you watching, have a great holiday if you're here in the US, and we'll see you soon. Bye, guys.
Thank you, JT.